So, hey there, everybody. I wanted to go to the other room for the session, but I have to do my own session, really. And I think a few others also wanted to join the other room, but I know everything about security already, so no. So, Anis and I are going to talk to you about embedding Webview, Cordova Webview in an already existing native application. I've recently had that use case and was working with a company which I presented yesterday at the conference as well, ING, to do this embedding trick. And I tried to find some resources on the web on how to do it. And there are a few good ones, like a workshop Anis did earlier, and Holly has some nice documentation about it. But I also struggled with it a bit, and I also learned a lot, so we wanted to share the experience here. So I already added this slide for you. There's a repository which you can clone where all the bits are in, the readmes, and also working projects. So if you want to build along with us, you can just follow along with the slides, or you can open up any existing repository from this URL. So you better grab it. So what we'll be doing is we want to show you how to embed a Webview in iOS and also in Android. And to keep it a bit interesting, we are going back and forth, Anis and I. We're going to ping pong a little. I'll be doing iOS, and we split it up in like 5 or 6 steps. And if you want to follow along with iOS, then when I'm done with my first step, then you have some time to polish it. And then you can listen with one ear to Anis's talk and use the other ear to program, or use another body part. But keep it decent because it's recorded. So, so I hope you all have seen this URL. The first thing we're going to do is do a little scaffolding. Just create a basic iOS app, and then add Cordova and a few plugins through Cocoapods. Hi, Holly. Holly is. I'm really thankful for her that she recently added Cordova 4.01 to Cocoapods, because I really needed that in the project I work on. So thank you again. Third step will be embedding the Webview, really, and then the fourth will be tweaking. I will tell you why. And the fifth will be a plugin to enable native web and web native communication to your app. And if we make it, I also will do a bit of polishing on the iOS side. And Anis.
Yep. So we'll do the same thing on Android. The first step is called step 1. We create a new native project. Then we make it Cordova compatible, like we add Cordova support to it. Step 3, we add a Cordova Webview. And step 4, we kind of go back and forth between the Webview and the native projects.
Alrighty. So let's get cracking. I'm going to open Xcode. And what I'm going to do is really look at this repository. The URL is still at the top, so if you have good eyes, you can still type it in. And there's this first README where you can choose between Android or iOS. I'm going into the iOS folder, and here are the steps again you saw in the slides. So let's go into the first step, scaffolding your iOS app. It's really a short one, this one. So we open Xcode. A question, who of you are going to actually try and do this here, right now? Oh, there's a few guys there. And also guys who are going to do Android? Okay, Tim. So Tim's yours. Make him happy. Tim is a capable guy, so I think he'll be fine. So do a new project in Xcode, and then you get this choice of options, and I'd like to do the tabbed approach now because that's what I rehearsed. So let's call it whatever you like, PhoneGap Day EU16, and give it a nice package name as well. And I'm picking Objective-C here, and including unit tests and UI tests as well, but I'm not really going to use them, so you might as well ignore them, but for a real project you really want those. So next, rehearsing, that was me rehearsing it, and make a new folder anywhere, and you call it, well, whatever you like, probably kind of the same as your project name. Oh, yeah, well, luckily it doesn't really matter, but it's just so you can find it later. You can enable Git control as well, but I will, well, I won't be needing this, I guess. So here's your project. Then, oh, we already did these. I can now run it. So don't pick the default emulator, because that's the 6S Plus, at least in my version of Xcode. It's a bit big. It won't fit this scaled down resolution, so here's a smaller one. And where is it? Oh, damn, it's also way too big. But here's the first few. And this is just a completely native thing you'll get with Apple renders for you. So that's step 1 done. Sorry? Command 3. Oh dear, what I'm gonna do? Ah, Jesse, you're my hero. Okay, I have another Zoom question later for you. I hope you have the answer as well. Oh dear.
Yep.
Yeah, you can leave that.
Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing on Android. So if you go to that repo, the steps are in the Android folder, and we're just going to set up an Android native project. So we're going to launch Android Studio. Fortunately for me, Android Studio takes a lot longer than Xcode to load, so be patient. So we're going to start a new Android Studio project, and we're going to call it PhoneGap Day EU16. Change the package name. Don't like this one. Like that, and then yeah, just leave that folder. Next, so we're going to target API 21 and up. So leave that default, and then we're going to use a navigation drawer activity. Leave the default values here, click finish. Is there a way to get a higher resolution?
Sorry?
Is there a way to get a higher resolution?
Way too, not sure, I didn't try it.
Okay.
Command 3 probably.
No. Yeah, because I can't even see like, oh, there we go. All right, so it's building. Okay, so we're going to change a few things. We have to open the activity main drawer.xml. And menu. And we're going to replace it with whatever is in the README. Then we're going to open the app bar main and click on the text here, and then delete the floating action button. Then we're going to delete these drawables because we don't need them. Can't see. Oh, there we go. And then in the header, we're going to change the name Android Studio to PhoneGap Day, for example. You call it whatever you want, doesn't matter.
Where will that be shown?
Yeah, in the navigation drawer. Yeah. Yeah. Then we're going to change the value of the header, so it's in this file. Change it to 100 HTTPs. And then finally, we are going to update this method inside main activity to match our navigation drawer. And then we're going to get rid of this floating action button because we don't need it. And that should be it. So run this. So whatever Eddie does, it takes me 4 times longer to do it because it's not my fault. Yeah, fortunately, I can't make it any faster. My computer's slower. Yeah, that's gotta be it. Come on. Installing APK. Okay, so resolution's all messed up, but yeah. Yeah, we've got the navigation drawer here, and we've got 3 views. So right now there's no web view, but we'll work on that in a bit. Your turn.
Tim, did you manage to keep up?
I couldn't delete everything. Where are the floating actions?
Perhaps Anish can help you. Well, be quick. I'll be done in a minute. So back to iOS. It's struggling. I was almost going to spit in it, but it's okay now. So we have this native app now, which doesn't really do anything, but we want to add Cordova to it, and by far, Cocoapods is the easiest things to use to do this. Cocoapods it's this website. It's like a package manager for iOS, and Cordova is now also publishing their libraries to Cocoapods, and also there's a lot of plugins published here. So I'll show you how easy it is to add it through this mechanism, and Anish will be jealous, I'm for sure. So close Xcode, that's what you want to do, because at the last step of this tutorial is opening it up again, but in a different way than before. So let's close this. And now install Cocoapods if you haven't. If you have, like I did, I don't need to do this. You need to sudo gem install Cocoapods like this. And sorry. Then you go to a terminal. And where did I put this project? Good question, Eddie. Where did you put this project? Let me see. Open. Oh, shut up. Rehearse yours once more. So, oh yeah, in my remove directory. So my remove directory holds all these test projects I have, which I actually never remove. So it's a bit of a weird name. So the first time I was going to test a plugin, I have this sandboxes directory where all these Git clones are, and then I have this remove directory. So the first time I thought, oh, let's test it and remove it afterwards. But I never did, so there's a lot of test apps here. So where did I put this thing? Okay, I might as well, before Jesse screams out to me, just drag it into the terminal, right? That's a smart thing to do, I guess. So here you go. And I also have this alias that Ryan showed this morning, LL, which is ls-al for me. Now I'm finally here, which should have been the easiest thing in this tutorial. I'm in the folder where the Xcode project file lives. That's where you are. Oh dear. It's this one really. this is where you want to be, and then you do a pod in it, and this will give you an almost empty pod file, and this is where the magic happens. And you can use any editor you like, of course, but I'm pretty used to VI, so what you want to do is just do the same as what you see in that README, and that's adding these bits really to your app. So the first one is the Cordova library itself, which is on version 4.01 at the moment. You can also pin it to a certain version, but I don't really care at this moment. And I'm also adding the console and the device plugin. And there's also this nice starter template, which I'm adding. I'm not really using its content, but it does some wiring I need anyway, so I'm using this as a starter template. And I recommend you to do it as well, because it's just easier to set up, and you just remove the bits in the .dot directory later you don't need. So paste those things in here, save it, and then what you want to do is do a pod install. And this may take a few seconds, but it's not too bad. Let's read on what we need to do afterwards. So we had this Xcode project file, but when you use Cocoapods, it will also create an Xcode workspace file for you, and that's what you need to use in the future. Otherwise your pods won't work. So, and let's see, yeah, that's done. So let's go back to this directory. So now we have this file that's been created. You double click that, and hang on, this one's still open. And now you see that you have this new pods directory here. This is still the same what we had. There's this pods directory, and this is where these pods have been added. And here's the config XML you're used to, and also this starter project, and also the plugins you want to use. So if I run it now, it's the 6S Plus. So this, but I have this trick now, so should be able to scale it down a bit. Oh man, wow, this thing is huge. So, but it's still working. You can see it here. So, Anis, over to you. Work your magic.
Okay, so what I'm about to do is the most annoying part of this workshop. And it's very error prone, so yeah, try to be careful. So to make a project Cordova compatible, you're gonna need a few things. The first thing is the Cordova Android Git repository that you can find on the on Apache. And then I'm just gonna cd into it, and inside the framework directory, I'm gonna run and jar. But before that, I'm gonna run this command to let Android know that this is an Android project. Then I'm gonna run njar. Since I've done it before, I'm just compiling whatever's changed, which is nothing. So then it generates this file right here. Can you guys see this? Yeah, so Cordova 5.20 dev.jar. So then I'm going to copy this file to my projects. So and then believe it's app libs. So copy it there. Then we're going to add it to our project. So the way we do that is by clicking on the project files here. Then click on libs. Right click on the file that we just added, and then add as library, and then click OK. And go back to Android. And it's still generating the project, and now Cordova is added to our projects. That's easy enough. Now comes the annoying part. So today there's no way to install plugins to an Android Studio project. That will change in the very near future. To go around that problem, we have to create a Cordova Android project. So I went ahead and did that earlier. So I have an Android project right here, Cordova Android project. As you can see, there's the Android platform that was added. And then I just add all the plugins that I'm going to need, the same ones that Eddie added. So we're going to need device, console, and this plugin, PhoneGap Day EU 16. So I added that earlier, so I'm not going to do that now, but you can go ahead and do that. There's a few more things that we need. We need to create an assets folder. So the way we do that is by right-clicking here, click on New, and then Folder, and Assets. Click on Finish. So we have the assets folder. Inside the assets folder, we're going to need a www folder. So create a new directory, call it www. Okay, so that's where our Cordova stuff is going to go. We're going to copy over the shared assets that we're going to use Eddie and I for this workshop. So to do that, go back here. So from the repository, there should be a www shared folder. So we're going to copy everything that's inside it into our project. So inside the assets folder, there's the new folder that we just created. We just copy everything in there. Then, yeah, we're going to need a directory for config XML. So that goes inside res. So we right-click on res and then new directory, call it XML. There we have it. So assets folder, XML folder. We're going to copy over our config XML from the Cordova Android project that I created earlier. So to do that, we go. So inside the platforms, Android, res XML, config XML. So copy that one over to our Android Studio project. And it's under app main res XML. So we should have it here now. This is our config XML. And yeah, we're going to copy these files over. Again, like this is temporary. This will change in the future, but right now we have to do it. So copy that over. So copy the Cordova.js file, and then the Cordova underscore plugins file, and the plugins folder. Make sure when you do that to not add the trailing slash, because it's just going to be copying over the content instead of the folder. So do that. Oops. Got an S. Okay, so you have that now. So that's for the www part. Now we're going to need to copy over the native bits. So start over. Okay, so now we have the native bits. And the last step I'm going to hold off for now because I'm going to do it later. So if we run this, everything should still work, but nothing will change. What's it doing? I don't know. Yeah, I did. How do you add it? You click on the project file. Okay, I'll come in a bit, but yeah, so same app, nothing's changed. You click on the project files. Go ahead.
I'll just stack mine on yours. Okay, so on iOS we left off at after step 2. We're still rocking this native apps, but we added Cordova, but we're not using it yet. But now we want to add a Webview to it. So the basics are done, and Tim is done with the basics on Android almost. I'll give you a few minutes. So let's fix the storyboard first. I left you off here when I opened config XML, but let's close this and go into this directory. These other directories are for the tests, which you really should care about, but not for now. So Xcode created a few view controllers for you, and a view controller really represents one screen. And the layout of the screens is determined by how your storyboard looks like. And I wanted to ask Jesse about zooming here, but I think I figured it out. I found this option. So, and there's also a keyboard shortcut, so, but this is a bit small. So this is the layout of our app. This one is the tab bar controller, and the others are the views you'll navigate to when you click any of the tabs. So let's open it up. It's pretty basic stuff, right? So what we're going to do is change one of these views to be the Cordova web view, and the other will remain the native web view. So let's do that and look at my README again, see if this is still correct. So at the second view, second scene really, there's this view here. Now it zooms in on this tab, and this view has a few labels, and you can connect to that in your view controller and manipulate the text and how it looks like. But we really want to do that with a web view, so just delete that one. And now here's the trick. There's this panel over here where you can change aspects of whatever is here. So when you're in your second scene, you switch to this view here, and it was the second view controller that was being used. But we actually want to use this Cordova thing, and that has been added because we've added this Cocoapods. So this is already part of the project. So now it will be using the CDV view controller, and that little class is residing somewhere over here. CDV view controller, where are you? There. So this is the header, and this is the implementation file. And you really don't want to see all this stuff, but it's useful to take a look at it to see what it's doing. And if you need to override a method or implement something or hook up to a listener, it's pretty useful to know a bit of what it's doing. But yeah, for what we're doing today, you don't really need to care about all these little details. But you can ask me if you have some specific use case or anything. Just let me know. I'll try to help you out. So we've changed the view controller of the second view, and we're now going to update the web folder, and that's also something where Anis is ahead. So let's go to this template directory, which I added earlier, but we don't really want the content that's in there. So this is the resources folder and the web folder, and we're gonna swap that out for our own. So we, like Anis said, we prepare those bits. There's this web folder here and this config XML here, which I need, and you can just copy it over, apply and replace everything. And the other thing we need is that shared web folder, which you typically want to use in a Cordova project, which doesn't have any platform-specific files. But these are the platform-agnostic files, so to say. So copy anything in here and paste that inside this web folder. And this is the iOS-specific Cordova JS and the other bits. So now it should be a complete web folder. And let's see if I've done all these steps. Yep. And we should be able to run it again from here. iOS simulator is so fast that I usually just stop it and reload it completely for no other reason than it's quickly up again. So this first one is still the native view, and this should be the Cordova view. And there you are. This is our little test project where we have these two plugins we added earlier. I added a test button for it. So there's the device plugin. Platform is iOS. And Anis has to prove that his says Android later on. And there's the console plugin as well. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but on iOS, if you want to see anything in your console while running the Cordova app, then you need this console plugin. Otherwise, you won't see it screaming here. So that's always useful to add to your iOS project. So you can go back and forth these things, and the web view will be retained while you're going elsewhere because it's referenced from the storyboard. But if you look at the HTML, which is, oh man, my HTML is awesome. Here, look at this, breaks and everything. But it has 30 lines really, and I'm scrolling down and I'm seeing 28 lines. So something is up, and that will be fixed in the next step. Anis, I hope you're ready.
Okay, so he caught up with me, and I'm gonna be ahead again. So now that we have the project Cordova compatible, we're just gonna add the web view just like Eddie did. And in order to do that, we are going to add this Webview Components to our content. So the content is under layouts, content main. And we're going to replace this text view, that hello world that we saw earlier. We're going to replace it with our web view. And then there's a few attributes that I need to set up inside my activity to manipulate that web view. So I'm going to explain what they are in a little bit. So copy them here. So the tag is just for debugging purposes. I don't think I'll use it actually. I just added it there. This is our web view, so that's our Webview Components. As you can see, it's like red right now because I don't have, I didn't import the class. So to import it, I just, on a Mac at least, I have to press the Alt or Command, the Option key, and then Enter. So that's, yeah, so that's our Webview component. The other one is our web interface. And the web interface is what allows us to interact with the activity back and forth so that the web view knows what's going on inside the app. And yeah, this is called stupid face for a good reason, is because I don't know why we have it, but unfortunately we have to instantiate this class to in order for the web interface to work. And the stupid face choice was my coworker's choice. His name's Joe, and he works on Cordova Android. So I just copied over his code here. I agree with him though. Okay, so we have all the bits that are going to allow us to interact with that web view. So now we have to set up that web view. So I'm just going to copy over this code here, add it to the bottom of my onCreate method. So the config XML parser is, guess what? Parses our config XML. So same thing, like I'm gonna fix the import here by holding down on the option key and enter. So yeah, we're initializing that class, and then we're parsing our config XML. And then here, we're setting up the web view. So this is how to set it up. You just grab the view from the XML file, and then you set up the Cordova interface here. Fix the imports again. And then we give it a new WebView engine. And then we initialize the interface. And finally, we load the URL here. So in order for Cordova Android to work, you're going to have to override some methods, and they are all here. So the onDestroy method obviously gets called when we destroy the app, and this needs to get called whenever the app is destroyed, because otherwise the WebView doesn't know when the app is destroyed, and it can't clean up after itself. So copy over that one. And then the other one is on activity result, and that is if you start another app or activity via like an intent. This needs to get called for Cordova to handle the response from the other activity. So we need to do that. And this is new in Android 5 and Plus, I think, because you can have granular permissions on Android 5 and up. And to manage that, we need to override this method as well on request permission results. And in that case, we just call the stupid face on request permission results. So I'm just going to copy over everything here to the end of my file, fix the imports again. And I believe we are good. So run this. As you can see, the web view is loaded. There's a little bit of padding here. We'll fix that later, though. So that's it. Your turn.
Did you press the device button already?
The what? Oh, I didn't press it. I can press it.
Does it work?
It should work. It says Android. And the console thing works as well. As you can see here, hey console.
But you don't really need the plugin for that, right?
No, you don't need it.
Thank you.
Yep.
So who's been keeping up? You guys for iOS? No, we lost you already. So sorry to hear that. So you remain a Windows guy then, I guess. All right, well, you can do it from your couch later on. Let's look at this web view again. Line 28, yeah, so obviously this web view is a bit higher than the viewport, so we need to accommodate for this tab bar here at the bottom. So that's what we're going to do in this step, tweaking the web view. You may or may not have this problem in your own native app, obviously, but it's pretty common to have a navigation bar at the top, so it's kind of the same difference here. So let's open up the storyboard and zoom out a bit. And oh yeah, let's see. Let's go do this. Change this one back to the second view controller, because we're now simply loading the default Cordova view controller, but we really want to have a bit of our own behavior. So you're overriding that Cordova view controller and using the second view controller for that. So I'll show you what we're going to do there. So we open the header file of the second view controller, And now we need to change this to the CDV view controller. Oh, yeah, did you notice my awesome plugin here with these? Oh, it even has sound. Oh, I disabled the sound, so it's the silliest thing. It's the silliest thing ever. Yeah, it's not default Xcode behavior. So don't blame Xcode. Blame me. I like to have some sparkles when I type things. So it's not recognizing this import, and there's probably a shortcut for it. Not sure, but we need to add this import manually. So import the header from the Cordova library, and now it will recognize the import. So now our second view controller will well, behave exactly the same, because we're overriding the Cordova view controller, but we didn't implement or override or anything really. So it's still this, and it's still not taking into account this tab bar. So what we need to do is, in the implementation file, we'll add this method. And this method here we go. This method here will look at the size of the view, and it will calculate the size of the tab bar. It's just a property you can read from the tab bar controller, this one. And then it will make a rectangle which represents the size of your page, and it's positioned at the top, well, origin X, which is really the same as 0.0 in this case, but this is a bit nicer than if you later add a navigation bar, then you don't have to change this code. And from the total height, you extract the tab bar height. And then you set the frame of the web view to this new bounds thing you created here. And I'm also changing the background color of the web view to be transparent, but I'm not going to use that here. But yesterday in the presentation I showed overlaying a native screen with the web view, where the web view was transparent, and that this is really all there is to it, except for some CSS. You don't need to, you shouldn't add a solid white background to in your CSS, then you still don't have a transparent web view, obviously. So, and then call the super again. So it's the only thing we're really doing is resizing the thing. And it doesn't matter on which device you run it, it will always accommodate for the tab bar. So now it's nicely integrated, and we have quite successfully added a Cordova web view to our native app. So the next step, we're going to do a bit more interesting things, but back to Anis for whatever he's going to do. What you going to do?
We are going to add a native list.
Ah, great. Oh, so you're ahead of me again then.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to fix something first. So you see there's like a little bit of padding here all around the web view. To get rid of that, we just delete these things inside the layout. So delete that, run again, and it should go full screen now, hopefully. Maybe. Right, so it's gone now. So we have this web view, and these things don't do anything right now. But we're going to fix that in the next step. So in the next step, which is step 3, we're going to add a native Listview to our app. And the lists is contain, I call them bookmarks, but they could be anything. So this value right here is for the keyboard button. So whenever you pop up the keyboard to get to type in like whatever you want to add to that list. This value here will show up, but you'll see that later. So I'm just going to copy this and add it to the strings file, which is, your phone just rang. So the strings file is under values here. Just add that. Then we're going to create a new layout for our lists. So right-click on the layout folder, click new, layout resource, and we're going to call it bookmark main. I think that's how I called it. Yeah. And click OK. So this is our layout, but we're going to replace it with whatever's in here. So it's just basically a list, like a native list, and a text field where we're going to add all the elements to the list. But that's basically our layout. So we're going to add attributes to match those. So I'll explain what they are in a bit. But for now, we're just going to copy them over to our main activity, just below the web view. So this one is just, I could have done it differently, but it's basically a string array that is going to contain the URLs that we're going to load. So there's going to be two URLs, the main one and the list one. And then this is our list view, and we're going to fix the imports right here. This is the layout that I just created in the XML file, so I'm going to fix the imports as well. And finally, this is the list that is basically going to contain all the elements that we're going to add. And in this case, it's just an array list, but obviously, if you want them to be persistent, you're going to use some other thing to keep them persistent. But for now, we're just going to use an array list. Okay, so we've got all the attributes set up. Now we're going to set up the views. So I'm just going to copy over this, and I'm going to explain what it does. Okay. So here I just add an element to the list, but I don't have to do that. I just added it here. Then we find the layout that we created earlier. Then we find the list inside that layout. And then we set an adapter on that list, which basically just says, I want all the elements that are inside this array here to basically be represented in that list. So we do that here by setting the bookmarks here. Like this is our array list of strings. Then the edit text is basically the input field that I'm going to use to enter elements to the list. So we find it inside that layout. So I'm going to fix the imports. And then if we find it, we're going to add an action or editor action listener on that field. I'm going to explain what this does in a minute. For now, I'm just going to fix the imports. Oh, forget about this one for now. So basically, here we're just saying whenever we enter an element or we type something inside that text field, this gets executed every time you type enter with a keyboard. EDDY will add a button. I didn't think adding a button was necessary because we can just type enter on the keyboard and we don't need a button. But you can add a button if you want. It's the same principle. So yeah, so basically when we type enter, we get the text from the text field here.
We agreed on the HTML code, right?
We did.
That's shared.
Yeah, that's shared. But the native part, I kind of got lazy. Yeah. So then we add the text that we get from the text field, and then we set the text field to nothing because we just entered it. And this is just a way to like hide the keyboard. This is the only way that I could find. There's got to be another way, but basically, like when I'm done entering the text field, I want the keyboard to disappear. So that's what it does here, like these two lines. And that's it. So So this is just two methods that are going to manage the list. So the first one just returns the list, and you'll see why I added this one for. You'll see why I added this one later. And this one just adds an element to the list. It's pretty straightforward. So you give it a string, and it adds it to the list, the array lists. And this is basically to notify the list that we changed the data, so it needs to update. If you don't call this, you'll get an exception. So copy this method. And then this red item here should disappear. I forgot to add this one. Oh. So add the two methods. Fix the import for this one. Okay. So now we're going to include, so we added the layout here. We're going to include it in our content view. So the way we do that, it's an Android thing. It's like you can include other layouts within layout. So go to content. And we're going to include the bookmark layout that I created here. So this will get included. It's basically just adding it to the bottom. Where am I? Right here. Okay. So now we're going to set up the URLs that we're going to load for our web views. So first one is going to be the launch URL. So that's the URL that has those buttons, the device and the console button, and all that and that list. And the second one is just the list editor. So I basically get the launch URL here and then just replace the file name. Again, like there's probably a better way to do this, but I got lazy. So copy this and change it here in the onCreate method. And I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need it. So yeah, so then we load the main URL, which is the index, HTML view. Finally, you saw those elements on the side menu, so we need to make that work. And basically, anytime I click on an element in that view, I need something to load in the content. So this is what happens when you click on an element. This method gets called. It's called onNavigationItemSelected, and you get the menu item from it. So I'll explain what it does in a minute, but for now, I'm just going to copy it and replace the existing one. So here, if it's the web view, I'm going to set the visibility of the bookmark view, which is the list view that I created, to nothing. So I'm going to make it disappear. I'm going to set the web view's visibility to visible. I'm going to make it appear. And then I'm going to load the URL, the main URL, which is the one that has the index.html in it. So then if it's the list web view, which is basically the web view with the list, so in that case, I do the same thing, and then I'll load the second URL. This is silly, isn't it? Because I did it twice, but again, there's probably a better way of doing it. But yeah, so I'll load the second URL here. So whenever you click on that element that says list web view, you're going to load that URL. And the last one is the native view. So in that case, I'm just going to set the visibility of the list view to visible, and I'm going to make the web view disappear. And then everything else is just defaults. It just closes the drawer and everything. Okay. And this is for the keyboard. So I don't want my keyboard to hide the app. So to do that, I just need to add this element to my activity inside the Android manifest. Okay. Trying to see if something else. Oh yeah, there's one more thing. So earlier I didn't do this step where I copied over the plugin, so I'm going to go over that now. So we're going to copy over the a Android plugin. So this plugin is shared between Eddie and I. So he's going to use the iOS portion. I'm going to use the Android portion. But I'm going to explain how that plugin works in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to copy over the file. So the file is going to be under Platforms, Android, src, com, PhoneGap day, pg day, and then it's app, src, Java, no, src main, Java. Yeah, we're going to copy it over here. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that plugin. Yeah, it's a good job. So we worked on it together, but he basically started it, and I just made it work. So yeah, so what this plugin does is that it basically communicates between the web view and the native view, so it makes that communication possible. So if you want to get all the elements from the native view, the web view is going to call, what is it going to call again? Something. Retrieve list, is it?
Did you forget to add it, or?
Action retrieve list, that's what it's, yeah, retrieve list here. No, I didn't forget.
Okay.
Yeah.
New over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the web view is going to call a JavaScript method called retrieve list, and the plugin is going to intercept it, and then it's basically going to get the bookmarks that I created in my native view, and then return that to the web view. This is what happens here.
Oh, you can remove the to-do then. You're already doing it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm already doing it. So the way to get the bookmarks is this way. So you get the Cordova attribute, and then you get the activity from that, and then you get the bookmarks using the method that we created earlier, and we turn that into an array of elements. And then on the JavaScript side, you're going to get an array of strings. So that's for the retrieve list. And then the web view, when it adds an element to the list, we are going to add it to our bookmarks list. Bookmarks array list. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to get the elements called item from JavaScript, and then we're going to call add item on that elements, and we're going to run that in the UI thread because this runs in the background, and because we're updating the UI, it needs to run on the UI thread. And then once we're done, we just return a successful value to JavaScript. But this is a pretty standard Android plugin, so not too much there. I believe that is it. So let's try to run this.
Tim already has it running, I guess.
No? Okay, so this is our web view that we had earlier. Everything should still work. Yep. So then we're going to click on the list web view, and hopefully it's going to load the list. And it does. And then if we load the native, it should load the native view. And because I attended Tim's presentation yesterday, I'm going to change something before he kills me. He said yesterday that you shouldn't add input buttons at the bottom because it hides the UI, so I'm going to add it at the top. And basically, I'm just going to change this. But obviously, I did this before I attended his presentation, so I didn't know. So let's run this. Okay. Go back, and we should have it at the top. So now if I add an element here, I don't have an add button, but I can just type enter. It just adds it to the list. And then if I click on the web view, I should get that element as well, because I'm calling retrieve list every time I load this view. And then if I add an element here, so it adds it to the web lists, but if I go to the native list, I should get it as well. That's it.
Nice job, Anise. So, if we would have used Cordova only, we would have been done now, right?
Yep. Oops.
Oh dear.
You're electric.
Yeah, you are electric. He's on fire. So, but yeah, we're not only using Cordova, and we're also doing a very silly implementation where in one app you can use two technologies to do the same use case. So that's a bit stupid. Exactly. So I'm at step 5, doing kind of the same things that Anise did, and this is actually the longest step for iOS because I'm not only going to add this plugin as well. I'm also going to change the layout a bit because I currently have 2 tabs and I need a third. So, for every step, I want to say there's also this folder here, which is exactly the result of this step. You can just load up in Xcode and it will run the result of this exercise I'm going to do now. So let's add a plugin. So the web part is of course the same, but the native bits are a bit different. So you've already seen how to do it with Cocoapods, which I highly recommend. And you can also use a private Cocopod, so you don't really need to publish everything. But yeah, there are still folks who like to do it old school, and I don't mind as well. So in Xcode, I'm going to create a folder to hold this new plugin. It really doesn't matter where you throw it. So I'm just going to add it here, so it's nicely contained. And I need a new header file, and I want to call it like this. Do a new file, create a header, call it PGDA EU16 plugin, and do create. And how Xcode shows you where the files are isn't exactly the same as on the file system. That's a bit different from Android. So you can choose where you want it to live, but I'm just going to throw it in the root. But in Xcode you'll see it's in this folder, so that's a bit of a difference. And I'm also going to add a new file, an implementation of this header with the same name, and it's going to live in the same folder, and you need to make sure that it's added to this target here, which is done by default. So if you just don't unclick it, then it's fine. So the header implementation will be this. It will be the retrieve list and the add to list. And for the implementation, we need a similar thing like Anise had, but in a slightly different syntax. Who of you likes Objective-C? That's one. Oh, I even see a thumbs down from someone, so cool. Yeah, I had to get used to it as well as a Java guy, really, but yeah, it grew on me. Not too much, but it did. So it won't compile because I'm requiring some other bits as well. So we're going to the config XML file to add the plugin. This is what Plugman does for you usually, but now we're doing it manually, the hard way, which you used to do at until PhoneGap CLI 3 or something. Well, I don't know, but people did it at the time, and I was really happy that Plugman was created, and it's a lot less headache when you have to maintain 70-ish plugins and people asking why stuff isn't working. Are you using Plugman? No, please do. Oh, okay, sorry. So this is the configuration of the iOS bridge, and we also need to add it here to plugins.js. It's just a bit of wiring, which isn't really interesting. Just need to throw that in. So let's use it as well. We talked about those two functions, and he's already showed you what it's going to do. And we also need this native view, which is going to do the same thing as the web view. So let's go to the first view controller, which didn't do anything until now. It was just sitting there, being pretty. And this will implement Uiviewcontroller, and it will have a table, which will really be this list of bookmarks, as Anis calls it. I just throw in anything I like, really. And it will also have this kind of not really persistent, but this shared list of bookmarks, and also a text field and a table view. And you might as well do this in the storyboard and hook that then up to your view controller, but it's easier for me just copy paste these methods in. It's a bit less work because it's already a lot of work anyway. So ta-la-la. This needs to live in this file. So what this is doing, this isn't really, well, okay, this is initializing this list of items, and I'm adding 2 items already to start with. And then when the view is loaded, I'm drawing a text field, a button, and a table to the canvas. And the text field is just an input type as text, really, but then a native thingy. It also can have a placeholder. You can style it anything you like. You can disable autocorrection, which I did, set a font. And at the end, you add the widget to the view. And that's this line, add subview. So I also need a button. A button has a certain size and a title. And when you press the button, something is delegated to this class, namely this method will be invoked, and it will also be added to the view. So this button implementation here, when the text is not empty, then add it to the array of items and reload the table view. So it gets updated. Oh yeah, and then also this bit where we want to notify Cordova to also update its view. Zoom in on that later. And there's also a table we want to add, which is just holds the list of items, which isn't really interesting to see. And there's also a few delegates you need to implement to render this table in iOS anyway. You need to tell it a few things, how many sections it will have. That's headers and content, and I only need 1 section. And also some other bits, how you want to style the table, really. So that's that. And I'm also missing a few bits. I need another view controller. This one is for the 3rd tab. This is the view controller holding the Cordova web view, where we will add these items. So the implementation I just did for the native implementation, this will hold the web implementation of the same thing. So I need a header again. And we kind of did this before for the index HTML test use case. And we are going to add this code. It will implement the Cordova view controller again. And we'll have 1 method, notify webview. We'll see that later. And we also need this implementation file again. This is all a bit different in Swift, by the way, which is more like a Java-ish syntax. But yeah, I don't really have a strong preference for either of those. So added the implementation file, and now also add the view controller contents here. So this is where our list needs to be loaded. And if you don't do stuff like this, you will by default have Cordova load the index HTML like we did in the 2nd view controller. Here we only tweaked the layout a bit. So here we're also tweaking the layout. This is the exact same code. We only tell Cordova here in view did load to set a different start page. This is really a method in the Cordova view controller we're calling into. And we're calling this list editor, which was shared in our web folder. And that's it, really. That's all we need to do here. So yeah, back to our storyboard, because we need this 3rd tab, right? So what we had until now was this, and now the magic for the 3rd tab will be grab this one, drag it on the canvas, This is the same as what Anis was doing when he was tweaking the XMLs. This is a more official approach, and you can also do a similar thing on Android, by the way, but you have a choice there. And you can also compose all kinds of widgets here in iOS, here labels and stuff, but as you saw, you can also do it programmatically. This is probably easier to style things. So what you also need to do is hold on to Control and then drag from the tab bar View Controller to your new one and select this option, View Controller. And then it will wire it up for you. Now I have to zoom in again because I really can't read it. So this is the new one. Don't get fooled by this arrow. So this is the new one, and you can, if you want to change the labels or anything, you can just double click here and then you can say this is our web list thingy, and this is our what was it? It was index in the web as well, and this was our native list, so we can make sense of what's what. And you can also tweak those icons a bit, but let's not go into that now. So I've created 3 view controllers, so I should be good. Let's see if everything compiles by now. Yep. Here's my simulator again, and we should have a similar result as Anis had, but this is way prettier because this has a button. So there's the first and the second item, and let's see if the web thingy is also loading. No, it doesn't. Okay, that's a pity. So I have to figure out why that is. Let me think. Oh, I know. Because I forget something. Let's go into this new scene where I forgot to assign this new view controller to this view. So it was blank for a good reason. So here's my simulator again. Here's the web implementation. Let's go back there, add a third item. And let's go to web. And there it is. And we can do a, let's show the keyboard. Fourth here. No bookmarks, no LinkedIn. It's easy pleasy. And there you have it. And you can also see the difference in keyboards now. That's pretty nice to see. So here's the keyboard without an accessory bar. And if you don't do anything, I have to hide it. If you don't do anything on the Cordova side, you'll get this accessory bar, which we all know and love, right? So that's quite a lot of code for implementing this thingy in iOS and Android, and we also did a web implementation. And I can imagine it's a bit much to follow, but perhaps you appreciate programming in the web a bit more after you've seen what we had to do on the native side. And on iOS you can choose a bit more visual approach to adding your storyboards. You can do the same on Android, but I'm always seeing people tweaking the XML more than using the designer view. And let's see, do we have a bit more time? Yeah, we have. So, by the way, if you have any questions, just shoot to Anis and me. Yeah, and otherwise I'll just add one more nice bit to the iOS implementation of things. So, what I'd like to show you is that there's a bit of a problem I had when I was implementing this web view. Was that the startup time was a bit long, especially in Android, and I have to really do an artificial long startup time here because it's actually quite quick because we're just loading the Cordova starter, which there's hardly any JavaScript being loaded except for Cordova.js, which is pretty fast. But we're not using Angular or React or any bigger library. So I'm adding this superb function which is going to burn the CPU to delay loading the web view a bit, and I've added it to the list view. So, by the way, you can also see that that the native app needs to load as well. So it starts the simulator and then it needs to load the app, and that's also a problem on native. So that's why splash screens are invented, right? So this web view is still really fast, but this web view, as you see, is crunching this for loop. It takes 2 seconds or so. But in a real app, you may also have this problem. So what you can do is preload it. Just load the web view when your splash screen is loaded. But in a bigger app that's already there, and your first web use case will be added, then it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to preload it, because you're adding a use case that's not being used that much. It's just a bit of a test, right? So that's also a reason why I couldn't do preloading, which I did a proof of concept with it. And it was working really well, and it was really easy on iOS as well. And I also implemented it for Android. And I have a recommendation if you want to use preloading on Android. What Anis did was embedding Cordova in an activity, right? I embedded Cordova in a fragment, so you can move that fragment around and share it between activities if you like. And that's what made the preloading work in that scenario. So let's go into our Listview and add a property to the implementation file. Throw it in here. So this will be our spinner, and this is just a native widget, UI activity indicator view. You've all seen it. That it's this spinner property you can configure in the config XML, but you can also manually kick it off in an app, of course. So let's add something to view did load, which will observe a Cordova event, really. Cordova tells you when the page was loaded. You can tap into that. You can also use this in plugins and stuff like that. And when the Cordova web view is loaded, you can hide the spinner. And that's here. The spinner view has a method called stop animating. And that's just what we call to make it stop spinning. And to start spinning, also when view did load is kicked off, that's before or while the web view is being loaded, you can do show loading indicator, which is implemented here, which will really is tweaking where the spinner will be shown. It's tweaking the size of the spinner. You can tweak its style. It's gray in this instance. And you can have it rotate with the device rotation. And then you add it to the view like before. And then start animating. So that's probably what we needed to add. So here goes the spinner. So that for loop is still in there. You might want to remove that later on, but doing this, add the item, going to the web, you see the nice spinner, and when it's done, you see your web view. But now the user knows that your app is actually doing something instead of killing it. He will probably be a bit worried. Why is this taking so long? But yeah, don't add an artificial for loop like I did. That's my main recommendation of today. The takeaway of today: don't do a for loop in your app like this. So if you learned anything, that's it. So removing that, and then you will hardly see the spinner. I also wanted to show you that here. It's gone already. So. Lazy and drunk. Probably. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, for instance, that project ACE is the other way around, really, where you start off with a Cordova app. Yeah. I think it always depends, and this is really tailored towards you already have a native app and you have an issue finding native developers, or you find out that once you have 3 separate code bases, that it may be smart to use a shared code base, but you don't want to jump on a new framework like React Native or NativeScript now. Then you can also share code in the way we showed you here. And by the way, this is a very ugly implementation because we didn't tweak anything style-wise, but this thing we did for ING was Ionic based, and it's very hard to tell the difference between native and web, so you can make it as pretty and as similar to the native screens as you really like to do. So yeah, so for an existing native app, this makes a lot of sense. And I also heard that solutions like React Native and NativeScript are working on ways to embed their solution in the native app as well. So it's really starting to be a very interesting way of integrating these technologies. Hmm. Yeah, if that would be the only reason to go native, then I'd say just use a plugin to do that, because you can really use any native code you like through a plugin. Yeah. Ah. Yeah, I'm thinking it may have been a setting in your Android manifest to how this activity is being retained or not, but we really need to look at the details for that. Yeah. No, and it can be really hard. This is the first time you ever integrate a native library in a plugin, then yeah, then I've struggled with that as well, of course. So. Okay.
But I'm pretty sure you don't have to change Cordova to make it work. It's only like you said, a setting in the Android manifest. You don't have to change Cordova to make the stuff work. Yeah, but you have to look at it.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Alrighty. Oh, Jesse. Sorry, again. Yeah. Awesome, relevant question. So I added this plugin, and it gets worse. By default, this is all enabled, and here you go. And let me type something nice.
That would get old really quick.
Yes. Yeah. So I started to puke a bit, and I disabled the motion of it. You really need this plugin. All right, thank you.